The Pultec EQP1A is one of the world's favourite equalisers, perhaps because of its heritage dating back to the 1950s, perhaps because of its simplicity of operation, or perhaps because of its sound. But can you afford one? Or should I say, can you afford two for stereo? A matched pair of new Pultec EQP1As will cost you somewhere around $10,000. And if you want vintage units, well, you might have to pay a little more. But then there are plug-in emulations of the Pultec EQP1A. In this video, I'm going to explore the Pultec EQ1A by Noise Ash, which, as they say, presents an extremely accurate model of this legendary equalizer unit. I'm going to concentrate on the low frequency section, just 3 controls, and I'm going to apply it to just one instrument, the kick drum, so that you can get a clear impression of what this software can do. Oh, and the famous Pultec trick. I'm going to demonstrate that too. Let's dive in. What we have here is the Pultec EQ1A equalizer from Noise Ash Incorporated, which is their plug-in emulation of the Pultec EQP1A equalizer, which is very famous and very well liked. And it has what's come to be known as the Pultec trick. So I'm going to look at that in the context of a kick drum in isolation. So what we're going to use here is just the low frequency section. We're going to use the in-out switch. We're going to use the low frequency boost. We're going to use the low frequency attenuation, and we're going to use the low frequency control. Just a word here that the low frequency control is calibrated in cycles per second, CPS. We would today know that as hertz, so it just means the same thing. So that's one thing we don't really need to worry about. So it's just these 4 controls: in, out, boost, attenuation, and low frequency. And the rest of the plugin I'm going to leave for a future video. So let's look at what we have here in the digital audio workstation. This is Pro Tools, but you can do the same thing in any digital audio workstation software. So I'll try and go slowly and do things step by step, so that if you don't use Pro Tools, everything is still very clear to you. What I have here is 2 identical tracks. So this track has a kick drum and it has the Pultec equalizer. That seems to have gone smaller, but one of the good things about this Pultec equalizer is that you can change the size of the user interface, which I think is a great idea, because many plugins the interface is just too small, and in some of them it's actually too big. So I've got the same thing in both channels. And in this channel here I'm going to leave the Pultec flat, so it's going to be switched in, that's out, that's in. It's going to be switched in, but the settings are going to be 0, 0, 0, 0, and 0 down here as well. And I'm going to apply settings to this track. So this is the one that I'm going to change. And the reason for this is so that it's easy to make a comparison, as you will see and as you will hear. This track here is the master track, and the reason that I've got that inserted is so that I can check the meter and see what level I'm getting from the kick drum, and this is going to be important for the comparisons later on. So that's the introduction done. Let's dive into the demonstrations. I have the levels set to -10 dB because I'm going to apply boost, and I need some headroom in order not to clip, because that would be bad, as we know. On the Pultec here, I'm going to start off with the frequency set to 20 Hz, which, as you know, is right on the limit of human hearing. So what good could that be, you say? Well, it says 20 Hz, but it's going to boost frequencies around 20 Hz. And this is what we call a shelving EQ. So it's going to boost frequencies a little bit above 20 Hz and all the way down to, in theory, 0. It won't go all the way down to 0 probably. That would be DC, and we don't really want that because it's not audio. So we'll find out what this can do when we try it out. But one thing, I'm not a kind of person to do things by halves. I like to go all the way to extremes. So with the boost control here, if I can get it up to 11, I will. I know it's calibrated to 10, but let's just see, there might be a hidden setting there. Firstly, let's just hear the kick drum by itself. I'll solo this track and then we'll play the kick drum. Okay, we've got a nice sharp attack, nice full-bodied sound of the kick drum, and we've got some resonance as well. So we've got good starting material to play with. So what I'll do now is I'll increase the boost from 0 to 10 and see what we get. Okay, well, you could possibly say it doesn't make that much of a difference. Well, it does make some, and we can find that out by switching the EQ in and out. Okay, it sounds nice, not too much of a difference, but it does seem to improve the sound, subjectively, in my opinion. Let's try it with the low frequency control set to 30 Hz. So I'll zero that, set the low frequency to 30 Hz, and I'll do the same thing again. Switch it back in. Here we go. Okay, so that's much more of a difference. So if you remember what I said earlier, this is boosting frequencies at 30 Hz, a little bit above 30 Hz, and all the way down to below the range of human hearing. Let's listen to the difference by switching the EQ in and out. Okay, that should be clear. It does depend on your listening system though. If you're listening on laptop speakers, you really can't expect to hear very much of a difference. If you're listening on near-field monitors, you should hear some difference, but if you're listening on a pair of speakers that can be considered main monitors, then you should be able to hear that clearly. Likewise, if you're listening on studio quality headphones, you should be able to hear that difference clearly. So if you can't hear the difference, you need to change to a better playback system to be able to fully appreciate the changes that I'm making. Let's go further. Let's go to 60 Hz. Okay, so now we have a really big difference. What you might have noticed is that the yellow lights were coming in at the top of the channel. I'll play it again. What the yellow lights mean is that the level in the channel before the fader is above 0 dB FS, which isn't a problem because the digital audio workstation, whichever one you're using, has absolute masses of headroom. And I've brought it down by 10 decibels so that the level of the output is below 0 dB FS and therefore there's no clipping. And it's perfectly okay to do this. What you need to do is to look out for red lights in the master channel. Because if you get red lights here, while you're listening to it, you're clipping your audio interface or the output of your computer. And if you bounce it to a WAV file, you're going to get clipping in that file because a WAV file can't encode any level higher than 0 dB FS. Let's hear the comparison again. Okay, distinctly different. Let's move on to 100 Hz. I'll do the same thing again. Switch it in. Here we go. At this point, I'm starting to think that the bass boost is too much. There's a certain happy medium where you're getting enough bass, not too little, not too much. You might well call it the Goldilocks zone as far as the kick drum is concerned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off to a setting that I think sounds good, and I think that's in the 60 Hz zone. That's too much, so I'm going to reduce the amount of boost. Okay, I quite like that, but it means nothing without comparing it to the original. Always when you're EQing, you should compare with the original to make sure you're making an improvement and not making things worse, which can easily happen. Okay, it does sound better, but the thing is that we're not comparing like with like. By applying an EQ boost, I've also increased the level of the signal, and it's all too easy to think that something that is louder is better, even for an experienced engineer or producer. So it's always a good idea to compare like with like, so compare the boosted signal with the flat signal at the same level. So this is where my other channel comes in. One thing I need to point out, just to be clear, is that when I click these solo buttons, it changes the channel and it changes the audio to the audio on that channel, but it doesn't change the settings on the EQ. I'd have to do that separately, and that's going to take me a little longer and spoil the flow of the demonstration. What I'm going to do is just measure the level of the flat signal. So I'll play it back with the EQ out, and we'll see this in the master channel. Okay, so we've got a maximum level there of minus 14 dB FS. Let's put it back in again. And we've got a level there of minus 8 dB FS. So by applying this EQ, we've made a level change of 6 dB. We've made the signal 6 decibels louder. So what I'll do is I'll take this channel here and I'll boost this by 6 decibels. We're on minus 10, so if I take it up to minus 4, then we'll achieve the same level. Okay, there it is at minus 4. So what I can do now is I can flip between the two channels, and we can hear on this channel, we can hear the EQ'd signal, and on this channel we can hear the flat signal, and correct it in level. So they are both, according to the meter, at the same level. Let's give it a go. Okay, so the first thing is that you'll see that in both channels the level is peaking at minus 8. Let me show you that again. So this time, without thinking about the levels, just take a listen to it and ask yourself, which do I prefer? Well, in a real-life context, which you prefer depends on the rest of the music. So which one works better with the rest of the music? And you need to try these things out just to see, because often you can't tell until you try it out and actually listen for yourself. What we've got here is an EQ'd version, which, because we've boosted the bass, in comparison, the high frequencies are less. And in the flat version, the bass isn't boosted, therefore we hear more of the high frequencies. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing at 100 Hertz. So let's take that up to 100, solo this track, and I'm going to find the place that I like on this boost control. Okay, that's about it. So once again, I'm going to measure the level by looking at this master fader. It's coming up nearly to minus 8, maybe minus 9. So let's just check this one. That's just a little bit louder, so I'll take it down by a decibel. Okay, so we've got the same level in both channels, and we are comparing like with like. Here we go. Okay, so that's what you can do with the low frequency EQ section of the Pultec EQ1A. Or, if you're lucky enough, with the Pultec EQP1A, if you have a real life one to hand. Lucky you. So, the attenuation control. You're going to use this when you're working with an instrument that's got too much bass. You probably wouldn't use this so much with the kick drum or the bass guitar because they are your bass instruments, but you would probably use this with a distorted electric guitar because quite commonly it would have too much bass and it would make the mix rather foggy and muddy in the lower mid-range. You don't want to take away too much of the bass of the electric guitar because that makes everything thin. You still want it to connect with the bass of the bass guitar and kick drum, but just to connect enough in a nice way and not make the low mid frequencies muddy. But anyway, here we are with the kick drum, so let's find out what this attenuation control sounds like. I'm going to raise up the level of the kick drum to 0. Because we're going to be taking away level and we don't have to worry about clipping with this control. And we're just going to see what it can do and just get an idea of the capabilities of this equalizer. So first let's play the kick drum flat. Okay, that's a bit loud, so I'm going to bring it down by about 4 decibels so it peaks around -8 like the previous examples. Okay, 4.1, that's close enough. Let's play it again. Okay, that's nice. So we're on 20 cycles per second, 20 hertz of the low frequency control, and I'm going to dial in some attenuation. This is interesting because when we tried out the boost control at 20 Hz, there wasn't really a lot to hear. There was something, but it wasn't a massive difference. Whereas with the attenuation control, we can hear a considerable difference at 20 Hz. Let's just hear it again. So what we see from this is that the attenuation control is covering a much wider range of frequencies than the boost control. It's going quite a long way above 20 Hz, and this is going to be useful later on when we experiment with the Pultec trick, because the boost and the attenuation control have different characteristics. But let's just stick to what the attenuation control sounds like for the moment. So let me go up to 30 Hz. And I'll do the same thing again. Okay, and 60 Hz. And 100 Hz. Okay, so for this kick drum, that's a lot thinner than we would probably ever want it to be. But at least we know what the attenuation control can do, and we have the possibilities to use it on other instruments. So now I'm going to look at the so-called Pultec trick. I've moved over onto this channel, not that it makes much difference, but it is just a little bit more logical in my thought process. So let's set up a significant EQ boost in the low frequency end. I'm going to choose 100 Hz and I'll probably take it up all the way. Let's just hear it flat first. Okay, so now I'll take the boost up all the way. So as we've said previously, that's too much. I'll back it off to what I think sounds good for this kick drum. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and I'll compare it with the flat version just to make sure. Yes, that sounds good to me, and I'm going to use that as a comparison in a moment. Let me go on to the other channel, so solo that and activate that plugin. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use both the boost and the attenuation controls together. That sounds like a crazy thing because you'd think they would cancel each other out, but they don't, because the boost control works on a comparatively narrow range of frequencies, and as we heard earlier, the attenuation control works on a wider range of frequencies. So let me set this to 100 Hertz because that's where we got the most significant effect. And what I'll do is I'll increase the boost to what would seem like too much. Okay, so that is way too much, but now I'll dial in some attenuation. So what the attenuation has done is taken away frequencies around 100 Hertz. So we're boosting sharply at 100 Hertz and below because it's a shelving EQ. But the attenuation is taking away frequencies above 100 Hertz. So it's giving a little bit of extra definition just above the 100 Hertz area. It's probably still too much boost, so I'm going to take that down. Okay, so I'm going to put it round about there. And what I can do now is I can compare it to the channel where I've got boost only. So these are very different sound textures, and you can't get this sound. You can't get that using the boost control alone. You need to have the attenuation control. It all comes down to what you prefer. So if you prefer one sound, that's fine. If you prefer a different sound, that's fine too. Everything is subjective. But the thing is that this attenuation control is putting another tool in your toolbox that you can use to get a range of sound textures that you might like and might work in context with the rest of the track. So what I'm going to do again is compare like with like, and I'm going to set these two channels so they're giving us the same level in the master channel. So let me just check the one with the Pultec trick. Okay, so that's coming up just above -8, and compared to, okay, that's -8 as well, so that's a coincidence. You wouldn't normally expect that to happen. So we can compare them like with like. They're both at the same level, so we're not getting confused by any differences in level. Let's listen again. I think it's worth exploring this just a little bit further, so I'm going to try it with 60 Hertz. So on this channel, I'll set the low frequency to 60 Hertz, and I'm going to set an amount of boost that I like. Okay, that suits me just fine. And I'll go back to this channel. Let's take the attenuation down. Going to 60 Hertz. And I'll set a little bit more boost this time. And now I'll smooth that out with some attenuation. Okay, that sounds good to me, and I'll just tweak the boost control again. Okay, I'll leave it around about there. And so I'll compare it again with the boost control only. So there you have it, an examination of the Pultec EQ1A emulation of the Pultec EQP1A on kick drum using just the low frequency controls, and also including the Pultec trick. So there you have it, the Pultec EQ1A emulation of the Pultec EQP1A. I'll look at the other controls in another video. I'm David Maller, Course Director of Audio Masterclass. Thank you for listening.